By the end of this video, you will understand everything about Bungou Stray Dogs Season 2. You will understand Dazai's backstory with the Port Mafia, as well as what happened after Kayaka joined the agency. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. 4 years ago, a low-ranking Port Mafia member, Osamu, visits a bar and meets with the Port Mafia executive, Osamu Dazai, who tells him about his day. Dazai talks to Osamu, and they discuss why humans fear death but are drawn to it. He turns to the bartender and requests a detergent-based cocktail. The bartender informs him that they do not have any. As Dazai continues to talk about his desire for death, a man enters and orders tomato juice because he will be driving. Sakaguchi Ango, an intelligence officer at the Port Mafia, sits down and complains about his bad day, claiming to be returning from a smuggling deal. Dazai tells them that they haven't drunk together in a long time. Dazai then asks Osamu why he does not complain about his job. Osamu explains that he would not want to bore them because, as a low-ranking member, he basically serves as the organization's handyman. As Osamu begins to list out his duties as a low-ranking member, Dazai gets excited when he hears Osamu say that he once disposed of a dud he found at one of Port Mafia's offices. Dazai begs to switch jobs with Osamu. Ango asks if Dazai and Osamu are in the bar for a meeting. Osamu says he ran into Dazai at the bar. Dazai tells him he came because he knew he would run into them both. He goes on to say that he wished for a reunion. Dazai then makes a toast, to which they all chant to the Stray Dogs, before taking a group photo. The following day Osamu is summoned by the Port Mafia boss. He wonders what the boss would want from him, given that low-ranking members such as himself rarely enter the building. He walks into the boss's office to find him pleading with a naked girl, Elise, to wear some pretty clothes. The Mafia boss tells Osamu that he saw nothing, and Osamu agrees. Agai Mori, the Mafia boss, informs Osamu that Ango has mysteriously vanished. Mori believes Ango was either abducted or fled of his own free will. He orders Osamu to find and bring him back because he has all the information about the Port Mafia, and selling it would bring the organization down. Mori then hands Osamu a document called a Silver Oracle, and asks why the mafioso has never used his gun to murder anyone. Osamu does not respond. Meanwhile, Hiratsu and his men discover the bodies of 3 of their armory guards. Hiratsu orders his men to find out if they have families, and tells them not to notify the city police. Dazai shows up and deduces from the bodies that the attackers were possibly soldiers. Hiratsu recognizes an attacker's garagist, an old European pistol, from a photograph. Dazai recalls a recent encounter with attackers and claims they also had such weapons. He deduces that their attack on him was a distraction. Using the information gathered from his recent operation, Dazai informs Hiratsu that the organization is called the Mimic. Osamu heads to Ango's hotel room and finds the place empty. He immediately notices a ventilation shaft where he finds a safe. Thanks to his ability Flawless, which allows him to see 5 to 6 seconds into the future, Osamu evades attacks from a sniper across a building. He then contacts Dazai and informs him of the sniper attack in Ango's room, requesting that the sniper's escape routes be closed while he pursues him. As he chases the sniper, Osamu is cornered by 2 men in black hoodies. Dazai and his men arrive just in time to kill these men. Dazai deduces from the pistol's low firing rate and accuracy that Mimic operatives' Gragas pistols serve only as an emblem for their organization. Osamu shows Dazai the safe he found in Ango's hotel room. They later open Ango's safe and find a Gragas pistol inside. Osamu concludes that Ango must have been one of them. Dazai suggests it might have been planted in his apartment by the Mimic to implicate Ango. However, he suspects that Ango did not go to a deal as he told them at the bar. Dazai believes he used it as an alibi for another secret meeting. One of the assassins gets up and points his gun at Dazai. Dazai encourages him to shoot and take one of Port Mafia's executives with him, since he will die anyway. The assassin hesitates, giving Osamu time to shoot him before the Port Mafia's men finish him off. Dazai begins talking about how the guy would have missed if they hadn't interfered. Osamu is pissed and turns to take his leave. Dazai asks Osamu to find Ango. Osamu is eating at his favorite restaurant. He asks say hello, so he does. They jump on him as soon as he walks in, but he ties them up and tickles one of the kids, who threatens to get him the next time. As he returns to the restaurant, he sees Dazai eating his food and complaining about how spicy it is. The restaurant owner tells him it's what Oda eats all the time. Osamu hands the bartender an envelope and instructs him to use it to cover the orphan's living expenses. The restaurant owner objects, saying he doesn't mind helping out. Osamu tells him that just giving the kids a place to stay is enough for him. Dazai informs Oda that Mimic is an overseas organization of gifted individuals who fled from Europe to Japan after being pursued by an English secret organization known as the Order of the Clock Tower, and that Ango leaked a passcode to a storage unit raided by them. He explains that the Mimic leader uses his powerful ability to command veteran soldiers, and then he informs Osamu that he has set various traps for them. Dazai receives a phone call and informs Osamu that one of his traps had worked. The mimic raids a mafia-owned casino, unaware that Dazai has set a trap for them. They enter the code and open a safe, which immediately triggers a sleeping gas that fills the room. Dazai's men immediately surround them while wearing gas masks. Osamu is at the Port Mafia's accounting facility looking for Ango-related information and possibly clues to Ango's disappearance. He recalls meeting Ango for the first time at the accounting facility at the Port Mafia headquarters. He learns that Ango traveled to Europe 2 years ago to negotiate a deal, where he may have decided to become a double agent. Dazai sees that all mimic operatives caught in his trap have been killed. One of his men explains that one of the mimic members committed suicide, and 3 others were taken alive but unconscious from the sleeping gas released at the casino. One awoke unexpectedly and killed his 2 subordinates, but when he attempted to attack them, Dazai's apprentice, Ryunosuke Akutagawa, finished him off. Dazai punches Akutagawa and scolds him for destroying their only source of leads on the enemy. He takes one of his men's guns and fires 3 times at Akutagawa, but Akutagawa uses his ability to stop the bullet. Dazai explains that instead of always cutting open his enemies, he should be able to use his ability for defense. Akutagawa is embarrassed and explains that he has never been able to use his ability like he just did. Dazai then threatens Akutagawa that if he makes another mistake, he will punch him twice and shoot him 5 times. He then directs his men to search the corpses for clues leading to their hideout. Dazai is dismayed to see his plan destroyed due to Akutagawa's thirst for blood. At this rate, Osamu may as well figure it all out on his own, he says. One of his men comments about Osamu's lack of guts to kill anyone despite being a member of the mafia. Dazai explains that they would be better off not upsetting Osamu, because if Oda gets angry, they'll all be dead before they can even draw their weapons. He further states that even Akutagawa will never be able to defeat Osamu. Osamu receives a call from Dazai, who claims to have discovered a clue about where the enemies may be hiding. Osamu goes to the mimic's base after Dazai confirms their location. He finds Ango tied up to a chair. Ango tells him to run, explaining that the enemies have planted time bombs throughout the building. Osamu unties Ango and reveals that he knows Mori sent Ango to infiltrate Mimic as a spy for the Port Mafia, and that he was captured because the Mimic boss discovered he was using flawless to read 6 seconds into the future. They escape the time bomb by going in the right direction and jumping out the window. Ango reveals that the head of Mimic Guide possesses a dangerous ability and has plans to crush the Port Mafia. He further explains that the Mimic comprises of former soldiers defeated in battle. They then notice a ball, which Osamu picks up. He immediately sees into the future that it is infused with poison. He realizes it's too late because he has already picked it up, which causes him to collapse. He believes that someone aware of his abilities set a trap for him. Ango informs him that everything he has told him about the Mimic is true. He thanks Osamu for saving him before fleeing with some soldiers in black. Osamu wakes up in the Port Mafia base. He tells Dazai about everything that happened the previous night. Dazai reveals that the soldiers in black that Ango fled with are a separate group of Special Op Corps that Ango works with, aside from the Mimic and Port Mafia. He then suggests they put that aside and concentrate on dealing with the remaining members of Mimic. Osamu then decides to join the Mafia in the fight against Mimic. Akutagawa appears during a clash between the Port Mafia and the Mimic, and begins brutally killing the Mimic's men. They fire at him, but he defends himself with devoured space before finishing them. He faces their leader, who introduces himself as Guide. Akutagawa attacks, but Guide dodges like he anticipated Akutagawa's moves. He then shoots Akutagawa's Rashomon and proceeds to finish him, but Osamu arrives to help him. Osamu runs out of the building, carrying Akutagawa on his shoulders while introducing himself to Akutagawa. Akutagawa claims to have heard of him from his superior, Dazai, who speaks highly of him. Osamu, using his ability, sees Akutagawa using Rashomon to kill him. He immediately drops Akutagawa and fires at Rashomon. Akutagawa informs Osamu that Dazai claims he cannot defeat him. Oda advises him that now is not the time to fight. He doesn't listen and attacks Oda, who dodges and knocks him unconscious. Guide arrives on the scene and claims Osamu is the one they're looking for. Osamu's ability then reveals that Guide is planning to shoot, and as soon as he tries to dodge, Guide readjusts his aim and shoots him in the head. He's perplexed. Guide explains that they both have the same power, and that he sees what Osamu sees. Guide challenges Osamu to a fight, but Oda declines, claiming he is only here to save one of his own. Guide explains that members of Mimic are all ghosts looking for a worthy and meaningful death. He then urges Osamu to fight him as he's the only one that can kill him. Oda refuses, explaining he wants to be a writer by the time he quits the Port Mafia, having been inspired by a man to write the 3rd part of an unfinished series he read as a teenager. He goes on to say that someone who takes lives cannot write about life, which is why he will not kill. Guide is enraged and fires at Akutagawa, who is unconscious on the ground. Osamu, it has already seen this with his ability, defends Akutagawa by blocking the shots with his body. He was fortunate to be wearing a bulletproof vest. Guide holds a gun to Odasaku's head but does not fire. He threatens Oda and lets him know he will make him fight. Guide gets into a car and drives away. Later that evening, Dazai and Oda are walking through an alley. Oda fills Dazai in on his encounter with the Mimic's leader. Dazai concludes that surprise attacks won't work, since their leader has Odasaku's predictive ability. He then notes that they'll need an insider. Odasaku suggests they find Ango. They walk into Lupin Bar, their usual hangout, to find Ango already drinking. Dazai says it was just a hunch when Ango asks how they found him. Dazai reveals that Ango had a secret identity before joining the Port Mafia. He explains that Ango is a Ministry of Internal Affairs agent whose mission is to monitor the Port Mafia's movements. Ango explains that the job paid well for a low-wage government worker as himself. Oda then points out that Ango is a triple agent because he works as a spy for 3 different organizations. Dazai asks Ango about Mimic. Ango warns them, especially Odasaku, about the singularity of ability, a rare event that occurs when certain abilities collide. Odasaku admits that he had a similar experience during his brief fight with Guide. Even though Ango acknowledges that he wishes to meet them again without their professions interfering with their friendship, Dazai and Oda ask Ango to leave. Ango leaves the photograph of the 3 of them on the table as the next day, Odasaku arrives at the curry restaurant. He is horrified to find the curry shop owner dead. He immediately runs upstairs to find that the children have been abducted. He then sees that they are inside a van parked outside, and he rushes toward them. At that point, the van explodes, leaving Odasaku to scream in agony. Episode 4 Odasaku bids farewell to the orphans who died in the van explosion. Agai Mori, the boss of the Mafia, meets with Tanida, the head of the Special Division for the Gifted. Tanida requests that the Port Mafia dispose of Mimic, who illegally entered Japan, in exchange for the permit that allows the Mafia to operate legally as a gifted organization. Following the bombing, Dazai approaches Odasaku, who appears lost in thought at the crime scene. He advises Oda against seeking vengeance on Guide. Odasaku remains unmoved, explaining that Mimic invited him and that he knows where they are. Dazai tries to persuade Oda that going after Guide will not bring the orphans back. Oda informs Dazai that it is all over for him, and he has nothing to lose. Dazai reveals that he joined the Port Mafia to express his raw emotions amid violence and bloodshed, and to find a reason to live. However, Oda lets Dazai know that he is willing to sacrifice his writer's dream to kill Guide. Along the way, he bumps into a detective who introduces himself as Ranpo. Ranpo warns him not to go where he is going because he will die. Oda acknowledges his deduction and continues on his way. Odasaku infiltrates the Mimic's base and kills all the soldiers easily, thanks to his prediction ability, a gun, and a grenade. He asks the last surviving Mimic soldier if he has any final words. The soldier expresses gratitude to him for fighting them and delivering them from this hell. Before Oda shoots him, he informs Oda that their leader is ahead. Dazai requests permission from the Port Mafia boss to organize a gifted squad to save Odasaku. Mori permits him but inquires as to why. Dazai explains that Odasaku has gone to confront Mimic on his own, and if they do nothing, he may die, and they will lose a valuable agent. Meanwhile, Oda faces Guide, engaging him in a death match. Guide apologizes for murdering the children, but claims it was a necessary evil. They are both fighting to the death, but they don't seem to be making any progress because they keep reading each other's futures. As they point guns at each other, they both agree to fight without using their predictive abilities. Guide is injured but tries to hide it from Odasaku, who is furious. Dazai confronts Mori about how he orchestrated everything to obtain a gifted business permit. He begins to point out that Mori allowed Mimic to enter the country illegally, revealed the location of the orphans, and put Oda's life on the line, in order to defeat the Mimic. Mori explains that it is a win for the Mafia because they have gotten what they have always wanted. Just as Dazai turns to leave, Mori's guards point their guns at him. Mori orders Dazai to stay back and not go after Odasaku, but Dazai says that he will go after him because Odasaku is his friend. Meanwhile, Oda and Guide are having a heated discussion. Oda reveals that the man who gave him the book many years ago knew he was a hired killer and told him to stop killing. That is what caused him to change. Guide explains that they were driven from their home, leaving them to wander in search of worthy enemies to fight. Almost immediately, they both fire at each other. Dazai rushes to the base alone and sees Oda and Guide collapse from their injuries. Oda advises his friend to live as someone who protects others, rather than continuing down his dark path. Odasaku dies soon after in Dazai's arms. 2 weeks later, Dazai quits the Port Mafia and searches for a new job. He encounters Chief Tanida at a bar, and informs him of his desire to work at an agency that helps people. On hearing this, the chief recommends him to the Armed Detective Agency. Back in the present, Tanizaki eats with Naomi in the agency dorm, and the two discuss Kayaka's police interview record. The records reveal she was an orphan before the Port Mafia took her in, and that her parents were murdered. At the agency, Atsushi briefs Kayaka on her first mission to deliver documents containing evidence to a judge in court. He hands Kayaka a taser and instructs her to use it to protect herself from the Port Mafia. Atsushi shows Kayaka a picture of the judge, which she immediately memorizes. Atsushi is astonished and asks her if it's her first job. Kayaka immediately reminds him that she was an assassin. After a moment of silence, she promises to do her best. Atsushi and Kayaka arrive at the judge's building. Kayaka tries to get in but is denied entry by a security guard. Atsushi tries to contact the judge but fails. He knows that they need to get rid of that guard somehow. Kayaka immediately comes up with a plan to seduce and murder the guard, which Atsushi refuses. Kayaka runs to the back of the building and shoots her taser at the power grid to disable the power in the building. She then makes her way up the stairs, past the security guard. She runs into a guard on the way and shoots the taser at him. After this, she runs into the judge's office and tosses him before presenting the documents. When the power is restored, she looks up and sees the judge in a bad condition. A while later, Kayaka sits on a bench outside the building. Atsushi hands her a crib. He notices that she is still carrying her cell phone. Kayaka explains that it's important to her, and she would not get rid of it. Atsushi suggests that Kayaka learn to control Demon Snow as he did with his powers, so that she can help the agency. Kayaka's eyes widen in fear, and she says that she will never use Demon Snow again. At that moment, Kayaka's cell phone rings, but she is frightened and doesn't answer. Even though she doesn't answer, the voice on the other end still comes through, and orders Demon Snow to punish those who tell Kayaka lies. The demon appears and stabs Atsushi in the chest. The voice came from Koyo, a Port Mafia executive with a golden demon ability similar to Kayaka's. She informs Kayaka that she has come to take her back to the Port Mafia. Atsushi interrupts, stating that Kayaka is now a member of the agency and activates his ability. However, Koyo's golden demon appears and slashes at him before he can get to them. The demon pins him against the wall. Kuryu then threatens to kill Atsushi if Kayaka doesn't come with her. Terrified, Kayaka agrees. As they walk further, Kayaka manages to steal Koyo's cell phone, and uses it to command Demon Snow to destroy her enemy. The demons fight as Koyo reveals that Demon Snow was responsible for Kayaka's parents' deaths. Atsushi is shocked. Kayaka then drops the phone, causing Demon Snow to disappear. As Atsushi struggles to get up, reinforcements from the Port Mafia surround him. However, suddenly Kenji shows up and throws a car at the Port Mafia. Kunikita also arrives and informs Atsushi that he modified Kayaka's phone to send signals whenever anyone calls it. He then scolds Atsushi for acting like a damsel in distress when, as a were-digger, he is supposed to be tough. Two guild members, Lovecraft and John, arrive on the scene and inform the two organizations that their luggage will arrive shortly. Almost immediately, 4 more guild members appear from the sky. Koyo immediately orders her subordinates to fire at them. The guild walks away from the battle completely unharmed, leaving the Port Mafia and the armed detective agency in critical condition. Atsushi wakes up strapped to a bed. Isano has completely healed Atsushi, Kunikita, and Kenji, but they are still traumatized. Fukuzawa enters the office and announces that he is heading out. Atsushi is concerned, implying that it is a dangerous time because of the guild. Mori is having lunch with Elise when Chuai walks into the room. Chuai reports that the agency has taken Koyo hostage. Mori suggests they hire contractors to assassinate Fukuzawa, so they can focus on confronting the guild. Koyo wakes up in the agency's infirmary and sees Dazai. She calls him a traitor and asks Atsushi about Kayaka. Atsushi informs her that Kayaka is missing because of her. Kuryu suddenly bursts into laughter, which angers Atsushi. He activates his ability to harm her, but Dazai stops and pushes him out of the room, saying he will handle it. Dazai asks Kuryu what the Port Mafia's plans are, but she refuses to be a snitch. Dazai locks the door and reminds her that at Port Mafia, he was the one they relied on whenever the torture specialists couldn't break a hostage. He goes on to say that there wasn't a single hostage that didn't talk after he interrogated him. Kuryu appears frightened. Fukuzawa calls Kunikita and instructs him to tell everyone to leave the agency and move to a new hideout. Kunikita concludes that Fukuzawa is preparing for war with the guild. Suddenly, Fukuzawa is ambushed by a group of assassins, and hangs up the call with Kunikita. Kunikita assumes that an enemy is attacking Fukuzawa. Atsushi immediately suggests that they go and help him. Kunikita explains that it is unnecessary. He then demonstrates Fukuzawa's ability by taking Atsushi's hand and flipping him onto the floor. Kunikita states that that was the first move he learned from Fukuzawa, and that he's never been able to defeat him in a fight. Fukuzawa easily defeats the assassins and orders them to tell their boss to target him alone. On a cruise ship, John informs the guild president, Francis, that the agency has relocated, making it difficult for them to find their new hideout, and that the Port Mafia has begun to make moves. Francis starts talking about how money is a nightmare, and that, eventually, the world becomes tiresome. He then claims that Yokohama will be his. Fukuzawa holds a meeting with the agency members at their new location, informing them of the dangers ahead. Dazai begins explaining their plan of action, and then splits the agency members into teams. He states that the defensive team will consist of Fukuzawa, Ranpo, Kenji, and Yusano. Their goal is to protect Yusano, their healer, and there will be 2 offensive teams. Tanizaki and Kunikita on one team and Dazai and Atsushi on the other. Chuaya calls Mori and informs him that the assassination was unsuccessful. Mori is delighted and explains that it's all according to plan. He reveals that there was a radioactive tracking element placed on the assassin's clothes. Chuaya confirms a strong signal, thereby exposing the agency's location. Two guild members, Nathaniel Hawthorne and Margaret Mitchell, direct cargo loading into a luxury liner. A worker informs them about a letter they discovered in the cargo written by Mori, declaring the Port Mafia's intention to obliterate the luxury liner and their lives. Nathaniel immediately orders the workers to hurry up in loading the cargo so they can leave. Margaret believes that it is a prank letter. However, Nathaniel points out that they have no base on land and is worried that the attackers might sink the ship. At this point, the workers report that they have caught a suspicious man, who turns out to be Motojiro Kaji. The workers also note that Kaji was caught with a crate of lemons. The priest correctly identifies him as a bomber from the Port Mafia. This is the man who tried to bomb the train in Season 1. He then activates his ability, the Scarlet Letter, and attacks Kaji before taking one of Kaji's lemon bombs and throwing it at him. They see a helicopter carrying cargo hovering around the ship. However, they are shocked to see that Kaji survived the explosion of his lemon bomb. Kaji explains that his ability is not to create lemon-shaped bombs, but his ability is to be immune to lemon-shaped bombs. At this point, the helicopter drops its cargo onto the ship, which turns out to be full of lemon bombs. Nathaniel instructs the workers to get off the ship. As the ship explodes, the guild members manage to escape the ship unharmed. Margaret is shocked as she watches the luxury liner go up in flames. Nathaniel informs her that it was no prank. He then reminds her that there are still two more targets, according to the letter, his life and hers. He then explains that if they could stop the enemy's surprise attack, then the enemy would be no match for them, no matter how many gifted users they had among them. At that moment, Nathaniel stares in shock as he sees his comrades impaled with Rashomon. It turns out that Mori had sent Akutagawa. Just then, he gets stabbed by Rashomon. Nathaniel asks Akutagawa if he is an assassin from the Port Mafia, or if he is a trial sent by God to test his faith. Akutagawa proceeds to attack him with Rashomon. As both of them battle, they realize that their abilities, Scarlet Letter and Rashomon, are both similar to each other. Nathaniel and Akutagawa continue to fight, but he successfully uses his ability to restrain Akutagawa. He tells Akutagawa that he must have fought only gifted users weaker than him. At this point, Margaret suddenly uses her ability on Akutagawa, saying that the Port Mafia was nothing, and that she would regain her family's honor. Akutagawa notices that Margaret can control the weather, but uses Rashomon to attack her. As he tries to finish off the priest, Akutagawa stops and begins coughing blood. Nathaniel realizes that Akutagawa was already injured before coming to attack both of them. Akutagawa tells his opponent to come at him, saying that there would be no point in him coming here if he wasn't going to get a challenge. The priest is surprised but agrees to grant Akutagawa his wish. He summons his ability before attacking him. Just as Akutagawa is about to be hit by the attack, he uses Rashomon Jaws of Endless Gates to defend himself and attack the priest. Margaret, out of nowhere, shields Nathaniel from this brutal attack using her body. Just as Akutagawa withdraws his attack, he collapses to the ground. At the agency's hideout, Ranpo complains that he is bored and challenges Yasano to a game of Hanafuda. Meanwhile, at another hideout, Haruno and Naomi see the news on the sinking of the guild's luxury liner, and note that the Port Mafia must be behind it. Yasano reports that many of the cameras have stopped feeding footage. Fukazawa tells Ranpo to launch the automatic turrets. However, these defenses are quickly dealt with by Chuaya. Fukazawa then sends Kenji and Yasano down to confront Chuaya. Chuaya shows Fukazawa through the camera a picture of two guild members, Lovecraft and John Steinbeck, with information about the time and location they would appear, telling Fukazawa that this is their chance to launch a surprise attack on the guild. Fukazawa admits the offer to ambush the guild member is attractive, but he knows there's a catch. Kenji and Yasano attack Chuaya in an attempt to find out what his actual plans are. Still, he manages to avoid Yasano's attack by activating his ability enabling him to hang upside down from the ceiling. Yasano recognizes him for his ability, correctly identifying him as Chuaya Nakahara, the gravity manipulator. Fukazawa informs Chuaya that it would benefit the Port Mafia for them to reduce the guild's strength or take each other out trying. Chuaya responds by saying they have nothing to lose by ambushing the guild. Fukazawa asks Ranpo to use his ability to see through Chuaya's real intentions. Ranpo deduces that the guild was also offered a similar trap, but they fell for it because it was too tempting. He then reveals that they used Haruno and Naomi as bait for the guild. Guild members Lovecraft and John Steinbeck are on their way to abduct Naomi and Haruno, despite suspecting that they are being led into a trap. Chuaya informs Fukazawa that there is still time to save them. Ranpo confirms that Chuaya is telling the truth. Fukazawa orders the office staff to evacuate and to be put through to Kunikita. Haruno and Naomi immediately evacuate the lodge. Haruno anxiously asks Naomi if the detectives will save them. Naomi assures her that her brother will come even if the agency does not. Steinbeck and Lovecraft arrive at the lodge shortly after. Steinbeck uses his ability to track down the two clerks and successfully locates them. He gradually crushes the car with his grapevines wrapped around it and explains his Grape of Wrath ability, informing them that they can't escape because he shares senses with the surrounding trees. Kunekita then appears and shoots Steinbeck and Lovecraft. Meanwhile, Tanizaki releases Haruno and Naomi and instructs them to get on a passenger train and escape. Kunekita tries to keep John Steinbeck from touching any trees until the Clarks board the train. Steinbeck knocks Kunekita's gun off his hand and restrains him with his grapevines. However, Kunekita outsmarts Steinbeck and activates his Doppo Poet ability, allowing him to create a gun and hold Steinbeck at gunpoint. Tanizaki alerts Kunekita that Lovecraft is behind him. Kunekita fires repeatedly, but the bullets do not affect him. Lovecraft immediately activates his ability and restrains both Tanizaki and Kunekita. Kunekita is left wondering what kind of ability Lovecraft possesses. Steinbeck grows grapevines again to stop Haruno and Naomi on their way to the train. As they approach the train, they are restrained by the grapevines, preventing them from boarding. Tanizaki demands to know what they intend to do with Naomi. After learning of their plans to confine and torture his sister, Tanizaki uses his ability to create an illusion that makes an oncoming truck driver heading toward them unable to see them. The truck immediately collides with Lovecraft and Steinbeck, releasing the detectives and allowing Haruno and Naomi to escape with the train. Kunekita and Tanizaki then flee the scene while police surround the two guild members. Dazai and Atsushi are waiting for Haruno and Naomi at the train station. On the train, Haruno and Naomi bump into a mysterious kid carrying a creepy doll. Dazai is waiting at the station with Atsushi but excuses himself, claiming he needs to use the restroom. He goes to a secluded place and is welcomed by Jin, a Port Mafia member, who holds a knife to his throat. Taguchi appears and points a gun at him, questioning how he knew he was being watched. Dazai responds that he created the surveillance techniques used by the Port Mafia. Taguchi informs him that she has a message from Boss Mori asking him if he wishes to rejoin the Mafia. Meanwhile, Atsushi greets Haruno and Naomi, who has just arrived at the station. Taguchi reveals that the Mafia will go to any length to win the war, and that Mori has released Q Dazai as a surprise, and reveals that Q is a walking catastrophe with mind control abilities who would destroy anyone, regardless of which side she's on. Naomi introduces Atsushi to the strange girl they met on the train. The little girl uses her ability, the Q's curse, which attacks the victim's mind with hallucinations caused by a doll, causing Haruno and Naomi to attack Atsushi. When Dazai arrives at the train station, he finds Atsushi choking Naomi. Atsushi realizes he is affected by the curse, and has been harming the clerks, while thinking he was protecting them. Dazai uses his ability to nullify the doll, bringing Atsushi back to reality. As Q leaves with the train, she threatens to return to punish Dazai for causing her suffering. Dazai slaps Atsushi, who is sobbing, and tells him to stop feeling sorry for himself. The following day, Lisa Alcott hands Francis another strategy proposal. He inquires about the next mission, but she advises him to stay indoors for the time being, because it is too dangerous. Meanwhile, Atsushi talks to Koyo at the agency office. When Atsushi asks what she's still doing at the agency, she tells him she made a deal with Dazai to stay at the agency until he finds and saves Kayaka. Atsushi informs her that Dazai has gone to negotiate with a government agent regarding Kayaka. According to Koyo, the Gifted Special Operation Division is the most powerful gifted organization, and will be the agency's greatest weapon, if they can get them on their side. Dazai meets with Ango, a Gifted Special Operations Division agent. Ango reveals information about the guild, telling Dazai they are above the law, and advising him to escape and inform his colleagues that they are in grave danger. The car then crashes into them. Atsushi is waiting for Dazai when suddenly he encounters Francis, the guild leader. He thinks the war will be over if he can defeat their leader. He attacks Francis, who comments on his skills, and then uses his combat skills to attack Atsushi. Soon after, Kayaka appears to save Atsushi. After saving Atsushi and escaping Francis, Atsushi inquires about her whereabouts. Kayaka tells him that she has been in alleyways and slums. She tells him that she called the city police, so the guild will have a difficult time finding them with the cops present. Atsushi tells her that she should have stayed hidden so she won't be involved in the war. Kayaka explains that the agency is her only home, and she's willing to fight. As the police arrive, Kayaka and the injured Atsushi approach two officers for help. As one of the officers calls for backup, he receives word over the radio that a 14-year-old serial killer dressed in Japanese clothing is in the area. The officer asks Kayaka her age as he reaches for his gun. Kayaka notices this and attacks the captain. She turns to attack the second police officer, but Atsushi stops her. As they escape, they run into Francis and Herman, a guild operative. Atsushi activates his ability, but he and Kayaka are shot by a sniper. The sniper explains that the bullets are made out of rubber and do not kill, but cause excruciating pain. Herman summons Moby Dick, the guild's floating fortress, and they take Atsushi away, leaving Kayaka tearfully asking why Atsushi showed her the light. She is immediately surrounded by the police as she bids him goodbye. A week later, Q wanders the streets, remarking that it feels good to be free. She approaches Lovecraft and asks if he wants to play. She activates her curse, but Lovecraft into a monster. On seeing this, she lets out a terrified scream. Nathaniel wakes up in the infirmary, asking about Margaret. Francis informs him that she is in a critical condition and may never wake. Nathaniel states that she is foolish for sacrificing herself to save him, instead of restoring her family's honor, as she always claimed. He then decides to do it for her. Francis storms into Lisa's office and tells her they will carry out the emergency plan. Lisa informs him that the plan will cause Yokohama to go up in flames. Francis is unconcerned and asks her to carry on with it. Q wakes up to find herself entangled in Steinbeck's grapevines. She threatens to kill him, but Steinbeck stomps on the tree, inflicting pain on Q. Francis informs Atsushi that he is looking for a book resistant to weaponry and special abilities. He claims Atsushi was abducted because he is the only one who can lead them to it. He says that the special division for unusual powers has been neutralized, leaving only the agency and the Port Mafia in his way. He informs Atsushi he abducted Q to use her ability to destroy Yokohama. Atsushi is terrified. Steinbeck informs Q that he has linked a tree in which Q is trapped with all of the trees in Yokohama. As a result, anyone who walks on roots or cuts down branches has technically harmed Q and is cursed. Steinbeck tells Q that the whole city will be destroyed because of her. Q cheerfully explains to Steinbeck that she never asked for her ability. Steinbeck aggravates her further in an attempt to activate a curse on Yokohama. She becomes enraged and declares that she will burn everyone down, activating her curse. As the doll begins to laugh horrifyingly, Atsushi begs Francis not to carry out the curse, declaring that he will do whatever the guild wants. Francis admits that his offer is attractive, but he will only negotiate with the survivors. He then rips the doll's head in half. As Yokohama begins to destroy itself due to Q's curse, Atsushi desperately tries to escape. Lucy approaches Atsushi's cell and teases him. She tells Atsushi about her difficult childhood and shows him the scars on her wrists. Atsushi explains that he understands her and has gone through a similar experience, and shows her the scars on his body. Lucy activates her ability immediately, and both she and Atsushi appear in her dimension. Lucy tells Atsushi that Yokohama is doomed. Atsushi claims that all they need is for Dazai to touch the doll, and informs her of his plan to escape. She agrees to help, handing him a parachute and leading him to the ship's plating. Atsushi is concerned and wonders if she will be punished for helping him escape. Lucy assures him that she is safe as long as she stays in her dimension. She then requests that he return for her once he completes his mission. As Atsushi leaves the ship, Francis notifies his men and asks them to stop him. Mark Twain uses his ability, Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, to snipe down Atsushi's parachute, causing Atsushi to fall to the ground midair. Atsushi transforms entirely into a tiger, allowing him to survive the fall. Twain then starts shooting at Atsushi. Atsushi is able to avoid being hit until Twain shoots at an oil tanker, causing a massive explosion that sends Atsushi tumbling. He tries to reach for the doll but is unable to move. Dazai approaches him and congratulates him for saving Yokohama. He touches the doll, nullifying the curse. He then sets off a smokescreen, blinding Twain's sensors and radars. Dazai informs Atsushi that, while they may have stopped the curse, the guild can reactivate it anytime as long as they hold Q hostage. Atsushi suggests they ally with the Port Mafia, as they are one of the most powerful organizations in Yokohama. Fukuzawa walks into the office and asks Dazai if he has made arrangements for the secret meeting with the Port Mafia. Kunikita is confused when he learns of the agency's plan to ally with the Port Mafia. Dazai informs him that it was Atsushi's idea. Still trying to understand what is going on, Kunikita asks Dazai why he is in charge of organizing the meeting. Dazai reveals that he used to belong to the Port Mafia, and that everyone in the agency is aware. Kunikita is surprised. Meanwhile, Mori and Shoei examine the dead bodies of their members resulting from Q's curse. Mori admits that if Dazai hadn't nullified the curse, more of their members would have died. Koyo shows up and informs them that Dazai kicked her out of the agency because he had no use for her. She then presents Mori with an invitation letter from the head of the agency, Fukuzawa. Mori arrives, accompanied by the Black Lizards, and is greeted by Dazai. It has been 4 years since they last met. Fukuzawa arrives shortly after, accompanied by Kunikita and Tanizaki. Fukuzawa informs Mori of Atsushi's suggestion to ally with the Port Mafia. He explains that he initially refused because cooperating with criminals is against the agency's standards. However, given that Atsushi has been constantly attacked by the Mafia and still makes such suggestions, he has decided to listen to him. Fukuzawa goes on to say that if they can't agree on an alliance, they should at least cease fire temporarily. However, Fukuzawa suggests that they settle their dispute right there and then. As the two bosses try to attack each other, Mori discovers it was only an illusion created by Tanizaki. Fukuzawa informs Mori that the agency will be retrieving Q tonight, and requests that the Port Mafia stay out of their way for the sake of both organizations. He then claims they have something in common, which is a love for the city. Mori tells Dazai that the offer to rejoin the Port Mafia is still open, but he declines. Mori tells Hiratsu that the guild wouldn't stand a chance if Dazai were to be his right-hand man in this war. Dazai arrives at the location where Q is being held captive. He is quickly surrounded, but Chuaya comes and confronts the armed men. Steinbeck is caught off guard and proceeds to attack Chuaya, but Dazai disables his ability, allowing Chuaya to attack him. Dazai and Chuaya enter the cabin and discuss how much they despise each other. When they find Q, Chuaya suggests they kill him so he won't cause any more trouble, but Dazai doesn't listen and begins cutting off the vines. He explains that with him being alive, the Port Mafia would still need his ability as a safety measure, and would not kill him. As they leave the room with Q, they are confronted by Lovecraft, who attacks Chuaya and Dazai. Dazai is surprised to discover that he could not disable Lovecraft's ability. He then concludes that Lovecraft's ability is not a gift. They proceed to attack Lovecraft, and just as he appears to be defeated, he escapes Chuaya's gravity trap and transforms into a horrific monster. Dazai then decides that using Chuaya's corruption is the only way to defeat Lovecraft. Chuaya agrees and then relentlessly attacks Lovecraft. When all Chuaya's efforts to defeat Lovecraft appear futile, Dazai places a knife to Steinbeck's throat and demands to know how they can beat Lovecraft. Steinbeck resists but subconsciously states that Lovecraft can only be attacked from within. They defeat Lovecraft, and Dazai disables Chuaya's corruption. Steinbeck is baffled by the fact that they were able to defeat Lovecraft. He then asks who they are, to which Dazai responds, "We are the bad guy's enemy." Meanwhile, Ranpo accepts an invitation from a guild operative. Yusano suspects it's a trap, but Ranpo appears unconcerned. They come across a riddle at the door, which Ranpo easily solves. They meet with Po, a guild operative who also happens to be a detective. He praises Ranpo's exceptional deductive abilities, and challenges him to solve a seemingly impossible case. He explains that Ranpo must read his book and use his abilities to figure out who the serial killer is. Ranpo appears uninterested, believing that he can easily solve the case. However, Po reveals that if they succeed, he will hand them the guild's top secrets, and the Moby Dick will stand no chance against their attack. Ranpo grabs the novel and reads it with Yusano. Po then activates his ability, which allows him to transport the reader into the world of his story. As a result, Yusano and Ranpo are trapped within the novel. According to the novel, Ranpo is the protagonist, and he opens the door with a spare key. As soon as he enters the room, he discovers a stabbed victim. He then realizes he has misplaced his glasses. Yusano and some house guests arrive at the crime scene. Yusano rushes to examine the victim, who then points to a door. As Ranpo opens the door, he notices an inscription on the wall that reads, "Welcome to Locked Room." Ranpo sits confused and is soon joined by Yusano, who informs him that her ability does not work at the mansion. She reveals that the victim is the mansion's caretaker. She then requests that Ranpo use his ultra-deductive ability to solve the case. Ranpo explains that he can't because he lost his glasses, and even if he didn't, his powers wouldn't work. Yusano believes Ranpo is still unaware that he does not have an ability. She then suggests they investigate the crime scene, but Ranpo refuses. Eventually, they interrogate the house guests, who all provide an alibi. One of the guests suggests how the crime could have been committed, but Ranpo disproves each of his assumptions. Yusano praises his deduction abilities, but Ranpo is doubtful. In the real world, Po explains that he wrote the mystery specifically for Ranpo, and that he will never be able to solve it. Yusano decides to wait in her room for the killer but is attacked. Ranpo rushes to the room and discovers Yusano on the floor, with an axe to her chest. She apologizes for failing to identify the culprit. As her glasses fall to the ground, Ranpo wears them while Po laughs, claiming that failure to uncover the mystery would leave them trapped in the novel for eternity. Suddenly, Ranpo and Yusano return to the real world, leaving Po in shock. Ranpo deduces that the killer is himself, the protagonist. He continues by pointing out Po's errors and accusing him and the protagonist of being accomplices. Po is devastated by his loss. Ranpo praises his progress since their competition 6 years ago, and encourages him to work harder. He then grabs the file containing the guild's top secret and leaves with Yusano. Later, Dazai and Ranpo plan how to deal with the guild. After much deliberation, they decide to send Atsushi and Tanizaki on the mission. Meanwhile, Lucy is handed to John by Mark Twain after she helped Atsushi escape the Moby Dick. She admits to allowing Atsushi to flee, despite knowing that the guild has countermeasures for her ability. John then consults with Luisa about their next steps. Dazai visits Ango in the hospital, and informs him that Dr. Yusano of the agency has agreed to treat his injuries. Dazai, in turn, requests that Kayaka be released before the agency's final battle with the guild. Ango reveals that she is being held captive in an unmanned aircraft. He explains that the Special Division for Unusual Powers may be able to secure her release, but only if she is a member of the agency. Ango accepts Dazai's offer of medical treatment, but asks him if he knows why his airbag did not deploy when a car crashed into them that day. Dazai smiles menacingly. Tanizaki reminds Atsushi that Kayaka is not an official agency member because she did not take the entrance exam. Tanizaki explains to Atsushi that the exam is to see if she qualifies for the agency. They arrive at the library, where Tanizaki introduces Atsushi to the agency's micro-assault fighter, the Night Bird, hidden within the building. Dazai informs him that he will be conducting the infiltration alone. Atsushi is skeptical that he is the best candidate for the job, but Dazai assures him he is. Tanizaki flies Atsushi to the Moby Dick in the Night Bird. As he infiltrates the airship, he discovers that no one is there. He then encounters Herman, who informs him that everyone has evacuated the ship. He reveals that the ship was rigged to crash and destroy Yokohama. Atsushi suggests to Dazai that they abort the mission, but Dazai orders him to stick to the plan and prevent the Moby Dick from crashing. Herman then instructs Atsushi on how to stop the ship, but warns him that the control terminal is heavily guarded. Mori contacts Dazai in the middle of the operation to inform him that the ceasefire agreement will not stand. This is because one of his members has gone rogue on his way to the control terminal. Atsushi runs into Akutagawa. Atsushi and Akutagawa begin to fight. Atsushi is curious about what Akutagawa is doing on the Moby Dick. Akutagawa informs Atsushi of his intent to kill him. Dazai, listening in through a speaker, tells Atsushi they don't have time to fight Akutagawa. Atsushi informs Akutagawa that Dazai wishes to speak with him. He, however, throws the speaker, creating a distraction and allowing him to pass. Akutagawa manages to catch the speaker, but as he calls out to Dazai, the line is cut. When Atsushi enters the control room, he sees Francis, who shows him the controls to the Moby Dick. He reveals that the Moby Dick weighs 10,000 tons, and that falling from 2 kilometers straight to the city center would destroy Yokohama. He then proposes a game to Atsushi. He places the control on a seat and tells Atsushi that he'll count to 3, and whoever gets there first gets to do whatever he wants with the ship. Atsushi rushes to the control before Fitzgerald can count to 3, but is quickly attacked by Fitzgerald, who appears to have predicted Atsushi's move. He shows Atsushi his ability, the Great Fitzgerald, which allows him to gain more physical power proportional to the amount of money he spends, and continues to attack him, rendering Atsushi unable to move, but Akutagawa interrupts as he arrives. Meanwhile, Dazai contacts Kayaka, who is still on the unmanned plane. He explains that they negotiated a release with the Special Division for Unusual Powers, and that he will teach her how to pilot the drone, so that she can bring herself down. Kayaka adamantly opposes. Akutagawa approaches Atsushi, kicks him, and commands him to stand up and fight. Francis interrupts Akutagawa's speech to Atsushi, saying he detests being the third wheel, but he is attacked. He counterattacks Akutagawa, and the two continue to fight. Francis notices Atsushi has vanished as he defeats Akutagawa. Almost immediately, Atsushi attacks Fitzgerald from behind, but he is immediately overpowered. He reveals that he investigated Atsushi and knows his past at the orphanage. He then informs them that they have 10 minutes before the Moby Dick hits Yokohama. Akutagawa and Atsushi manage to run away from Fitzgerald. Akutagawa catches up with Atsushi as he attempts to escape and attacks him. He explains that he now understands Atsushi, deducing that the were-danger only fights to earn the right to live. He then refers to him as a disappointment, claiming that he could kill Atsushi 100 times and still not be satisfied. Along the line, Akutagawa reveals his desperate desire for Dazai's approval, but Francis arrives and interrupts their conversation. Dazai tries to convince Kayaka that she can only change if she is willing, and that the agency is giving her that opportunity. He then shares Atsushi's story of how he went from being a ferocious beast to risking his life to protect the city. While Francis is giving Akutagawa the beating of his life, Atsushi discovers and runs into a cargo elevator. Akutagawa soon joins him. The two continue their heated exchange. Atsushi cannot understand how Akutagawa could kill so many people just to show off his power, and Akutagawa can't understand why Atsushi can't let go of the past. Francis greets the pair as they arrive at the top of Moby Dick, and informs them that they will not be able to stop the ship from crashing, and that only he will survive due to his ability. Akutagawa then attacks him, believing that he will no longer be weak if he defeats him. He first activates Rashomon's demonic armor, and proceeds to attack. Meanwhile, Atsushi connects with his inner tiger and asks for strength before joining the fight. The two attack Francis and manage to land a punch that knocks him off the top of the Moby Dick simultaneously. Akutagawa deactivates his ability and falls to the ground, but Atsushi remains determined to reach the control terminal. Francis eventually returns to the top of the ship and explains his motive to retrieve a book in Yokohama that is said to be able to make whatever one writes come to reality. He reveals that he intends to use the book to bring back his dead daughter at any cost. Just then he unleashes his greatest power. The smiles of the agency members enter Atsushi's thoughts. He asks Akutagawa if he is a fool for trying to escape his past. Akutagawa responds that the words from his past have nothing to do with who he is now. Atsushi begins to walk towards Francis, telling Akutagawa that Dazai has long approved of him. He is approached by the two as they summon their abilities. Atsushi and Akutagawa attack Fitzgerald, but he manages to fight them off. Francis knocks Atsushi off the ship, causing him to pass out. Akutagawa extends his Rashomon, allowing him to save Atsushi. When Atsushi regains consciousness and returns to face Fitzgerald, Akutagawa wraps Rashomon around his arm, allowing them to use their combined forces to defeat their opponent. As Akutagawa withdraws his Rashomon, he collapses. Atsushi suddenly remembers that he needs to go to the control terminal, but Akutagawa stops and gives him the device. Atsushi takes it and hurriedly prevents the Moby Dick from descending to the city and self-destructing. Akutagawa tells Atsushi that he wishes he could rip him to shreds, but that he has exhausted his strength. He then informs him that he will deal with him when they next meet. However, the ship begins to descend once more. They rush to the control terminal and find that nothing is working. Herman appears and informs them that someone has taken over the ship from outside. Suddenly, Atsushi hears Kayaka's voice. She reaches out to him and tells him there is still a way to prevent the Moby Dick from crashing into the city. She suggests that she use her drone to apply sufficient force from above to destroy the ship before it reaches the city. Atsushi is relieved and requests that Herman prepare the parachutes. He then asks her to flee the drone, but she says she can't because her ankles are chained. She begs Atsushi to forget about her, explaining that she is willing to die to save everyone. Akutagawa drags Atsushi out of the control terminal despite his screams. As they all escape, Atsushi watches Kayaka's drone collide with Moby Dick, causing it to crash into the sea. As they land safely, Atsushi begins to mourn Kayaka's death, but is interrupted as Fukazawa and Dazai arrive. Fukazawa reveals that his ability "all men are created equal" only affects agency members, and she was not a member until she passed the exam. Dazai explains that the president's ability allows for control over the output of another's abilities. As a result, he reveals that Atsushi gained control of his ability after officially joining the agency. He then tells Atsushi that Kayaka passed the entrance exam. Almost immediately, Kayaka appears and tells Atsushi that she cut the chains with her Demon Snow's katana and escaped before the impact. Atsushi is overjoyed and rushes to embrace her. Akutagawa interrupts, pleading with Dazai to see his strength. Dazai approaches Akutagawa and informs him that he has grown stronger. Akutagawa faints upon hearing this. Later, Dazai congratulated Atsushi for saving the city. The next day, Ango approaches Herman and requests information, explaining that he won't have to arrest guild members who weren't involved in this. Herman denies knowing anything, but Ango counters by revealing that he was the guild leader 2 generations ago. Herman agrees to cooperate after Ango shows him his handcuffs. Twain, John, and Lisa discuss their fate in the aftermath of the destruction of Moby Dick and the disappearance of their leader. Twain says he will be returning home to finish his biography. Lisa says she will stay to look for Francis Fitzgerald, who she believes is still alive, and John Steinbeck says he will end the insurgency with the guild. Lovecraft appears and informs them that he is going to sleep before jumping into the river. The agency members congratulate Kayaka on being an official member of the agency, and they then celebrate. Atsushi approaches Naomi and Haruno, and apologizes for the terrible things he did to them due to Q's curse. They appear to have forgotten and inform him that they cannot continue to hold on to things like that. At the Port Mafia, Mori, Chuaya, and Koyo celebrate their victory over the guild. Chuaya then suggests that they punish Akutagawa for nearly costing them their lives. Mori counters, claiming that Akutagawa played a significant role in their victory over the guild, and that he has always been the type to run off by himself and cause destruction, but in the end, he contributes the most. He then asks Koyo why she didn't try to escape when she was held captive by the agency. She responds that their tea was far too delicious. Meanwhile, at a museum, Dazai thanks Hiratsu for being a part of the plan to get Akutagawa on the Moby Dick, by tricking him into thinking he would face off against Atsushi, not realizing that it was so that they could defeat Fitzgerald together. However, he warns Hiratsu that the worst is yet to come. Nathaniel meets with a man who informs him that, despite their failure to destroy the Moby Dick, they were successful in causing strife within the guild and recruiting talented gifteds. Nathaniel notes that he is only helping to fulfill his end of the bargain, as the man helped Margaret regain consciousness from a coma.